Next, Scotland could become the first country in the UK to implement an outright ban on smacking. The idea is being promoted by a Green Party politician, but Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says she has no objection to banning parents from physically punishing their child in any way. A similar outright ban is being consulted on in Wales. Some say that politicians should not interfere with parenting decisions, though. Currently, parents in England, Wales and Northern Ireland can use reasonable chastisement, although hitting a child so that it leaves a mark is banned. The rules are slightly different in Scotland, where using an implement, shaking a child and striking a child's head are all banned. Let's talk now to Rona Mackay from the SNP and Mary Glasgow. She's from the charity Children First, which has been campaigning for a smacking ban for many years. Thank you both for coming on the programme. Mary Glasgow, first of all, why should there be an outright ban? Why not trust parents?
We're supportive of the removal of the defence of justifiable assault against children, because the evidence is absolutely clear that physical treatment of children causes harm and long-term effects that include an escalation in poor behaviour, increased aggression, delinquency and often more emotional harm. So that's why we think that in 2017 it's time that we gave children equal protection from assault that we do to adults.
Right. And when you use the word assault deliberately, and I understand why, but do you think that's what parents are doing if they, I don't know, tap their kid on the back, or I don't know, what do you define as assault?
So the language is really important, because the legislation that John Finney's bill seeks to amend talks about parents' abilities to claim that they've justifiably assaulted their children in terms of chastisement. And the evidence is clear, it doesn't work.
Let me bring in Richard Lucas, who's the leader of the newly formed Scottish Family Party. Richard Lucas, you don't want to see an outright ban on parents being able to smack their children. Tell us why.
That's right. As the Scottish Family Party, we're not particularly pro-smacking, but we're anti the imposition of a state philosophy of child rearing on every family in Scotland, and that's what this amounts to. I think the Scottish government, educational, social work, academic establishment has its own understanding of how to bring up children, and they want to impose that on everyone. And a lot of parents in Scotland would take a different view, and they should have every right to bring up their children in accord with it. OK,
Rona Mackay, what do you think the chances are of this, an outright ban being introduced then?
Well, in last week's programme for government announced by the First Minister, she said that she, we would not block this bill, and it could possibly go to a free vote among the parties, which I was delighted with. As you said, this was brought in by a Green Party member, and I supported it from day one. So this was just part of a very forward-thinking programme for government, and I'm delighted that we are prepared to consider it.
Richard Lucas, do talk to Rona Mackay from the SNP and tell her your views.
Yes, certainly. The Greens introduced this. The normal procedure in the Scottish Parliament is that the Greens lead the way and the other parties follow on. And I think that's what we see there. But we talk about the research and the evidence. What this is really coming from is a philosophy of child rearing. I say the Scottish social work educational government establishment believes that if you care for children properly, talk through issues with them, that's enough. There's no need for punishments. And we see this philosophy coming through in the criminal justice system, we see it coming through in education, we see it coming through in social work. And I think that the talk about the evidence of the harm that it does, that's very disputable. There's evidence that smacking children has positive effects as well. But the academic departments producing this research, producing this evidence, if you look at the philosophical, the political biases of those departments, it's massive.
OK, well, Rona Mackay shaking her head in disagreement. Do talk to Richard Lucas.
Well, I mean, I just dispute everything that he said there. And the UK is one of 6 countries throughout the EU. The other 27 countries, we're one of only 6 countries who still allow this. And it's, as Mary Glasgow said, it's been proved not to work. Children learn from, they grow from learned behaviour. So if they're used to seeing that happening, if they're used to being assaulted, this can make them think, well, if it's okay for mum and dad to do that to me, then I can do it to someone else. And it has a huge knock-on effect on bullying and, as Mary Glasgow said, in development of the child in later life.
Okay, let's leave aside.
It's also not just social work professionals, it's also the Church of Scotland, it's the Police Federation, it's 75% of respondents to John Finney's consultation on this issue. The idea that it's all right to physically assault children, to teach them right from wrong, is absurd in 2017, and the evidence supports that. An international review of the evidence supports that, and the country of Scotland is with John Finney on this issue, and we support this bill because it makes absolute sense, as Rhoda says.
The country of Scotland. In Scotland, there's a huge range of government-funded charities and organisations that all form a mass choir in support of the government. So there will be lots of organisations supporting this. Let's leave the academic research aside. Let's look at some other facts. Over the last 60 years, the amount of physical punishment of children has decreased hugely. Let's see what's happened in other ways. Crime statistics. Now, annual crime statistics have got an extra 0 or 2 on the end of them. Disability problems in schools are far more serious than they were. Mental health problems in young people are far more serious than they were. And that's the changes that have happened in the last 60 years, while physical punishment of children has reduced hugely.
Can I just...
That's
sorry.
a fascinating argument.
Go on, Rhoda McKay, we can hear you.
Can I just point out to Richard that crime in Scotland is at a 42-year record low, so that doesn't stack up with what he's said. And this is not about criminalising people, it's about establishing good practice, and we think this is definitely a step forward in the welfare of children, and it has been proved beyond doubt it is.
It's not about criminalising people. How are people going to be treated if they do get fed up with their kid when they're throwing the lunch at them for the 3rd time and they just give them a slap on the wrist and they're taken to court and they're prosecuted? In what sense is that not about criminalising people?
Well, the evidence suggests that there's no...
Hang on, sorry. Just let Rhoda McKay answer that.
Well, I think that's quite an extreme and absurd example of what we're talking about here. Well, that's not what's going to happen.
Exactly the relevant situation.
Not at all.
So if you do bring in an outright ban and someone does smack their child on the back of their legs, Rhoda McKay, what is the sanction? What will happen?
Well, currently, if you see someone smacking their child, say in the street, and it's quite disturbing to you, few people would go over and intervene because they would be thought of as being a busybody. Whereas if there is a law in place which says, well, actually, you can't do that, that's illegal, people will be much more likely to try and go over and say, is that reasonable? But it's not even about that. It's just about...
And then what would happen? Sorry, just to follow it through to its logical conclusion, then what would happen to that parent?
Well, it depends. I mean, it absolutely depends. It would obviously, if it was serious enough, it would go to the Procurator Fiscal and they would take the decision about whether it would be charged
serious
or
enough.
not.
Now, that is interesting, because if it's an outright ban, then presumably it's not about the level of seriousness, is it?
No, it's not.
Correct.
And it's not about the level of seriousness, but...
So you're turning that parent into a criminal. And then possibly there'll be criminal proceedings and the child might be taken away from them. The named person will be poised to pounce against this violent parent, this parent who's assaulted their child, and that could be very detrimental for the parent and the child.
I think that's a complete distortion of what we're talking about.
All right, we're going to leave it there. But thank you so much. I appreciate your time, all of you. Rhoda McKay from the SNP, Mary Glasgow from the charity Children First, and Richard Lucas from the newly formed Scottish Family Party. Scotland looks likely to become the first country in the UK to bring in an outright ban on smacking. Now, a massively successful internet reality show has put hip-hop music into the national spotlight for the first time in China, with more than 2.5 billion views on China's largest online video hosting website. The Rap of China has seen dozens of Chinese rappers shoot to stardom. Have a look.
Chinese people are dope. Chinese rappers are dope.